Hello, Jacob. And today, thought I'd kind of go over our depth chart and kind of give my thoughts and opinions on the team going into training camp, preseason, and then to see who kind of ends up on our team going into the regular season open. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, yeah. Go ahead and kind of start off with our forwards here. Like I say, there's plenty of guys here that I'll be interested to see. Nick Bjugstad, obviously, coming back, Minnesota boy, played really well for us last year. Boldy will be one of those pieces that's going to be huge for the future of this team. And so will Cramarosa, who actually, he wasn't a massive piece per se last year, but he definitely held his own, and he definitely kept us in more games than he was sort of a, liability, for lack of a better term. He was definitely a big piece for us. Connor DeWar is probably going to be like an AHL, NHL, bottom player, or just sort of like a transition player. He's probably going to play more in the, for the Iowa Wild than the Minnesota Wild, but be another piece to kind of keep an eye on. And of course, Joel Eric Sinek, who's probably going to be one of our main, stalwart players going into next season, especially after that 8-year extension. And Joel Eriksson over the last couple of seasons that I've seen of him has really stepped up his game. He's not afraid to get into the paint. He can play dirty. He can play mean. He can play right up against your goaltender. He's not afraid to get in there. But he can also play a finesse game too, which is very important. And not to mention, he's a relatively young guy himself, too. So, and of course, Kevin Fiala, Marcus Foligno, those two guys were, again, really key depth pieces for us. And Fiala with Kirill Kaprizov, who, by the way, thank God that's finally over with, which I think was the biggest thing that Minnesota Wild fans were just hoping would happen and finally did. Because, again, with Kirill Kaprizov, with guys like Fiala, Foligno, Ek, and, his line mates and stuff like that, Kirill Kaprizov literally gave us an extra spark that I don't think Minnesota Wild fans have seen maybe since the days of, Marian Gaborik. He was one of those players where every time he was on the ice, you have to watch him because you don't know what's going to happen, because all you know is something good is probably going to happen. Whether or not he scores an amazing goal, he sets up an absolute beautiful assist, or at the very least he just sort of takes, the attention away from the defense, and then you can pass it off to another guy who can sneak in behind there and get a dirty goal. Kirill Kaprizov is must watch. And for Minnesota Wild fans, last year, watching him, that dude was special for us. On a team that normally doesn't have a lot of, flash and all that stuff. It's amazing what happens when you actually have a key player that you can build around. And of course that was Suter and Parise, but now that Suter and Parise are gone to Dallas and the Islanders, respectfully, it's yeah, we're going to need that depth and those, players, in leadership to step up. Because, again, they were longtime captains and assistant captains for this team as well. So, Suter and Parise being gone will definitely leave a hole, but, again, with all the young pieces that are coming up, like Boldy, like Rossi, those two players are going to be two key players to watch this upcoming season. And then, of course, we finally get to one of our new players in Frederick Gaudreau, who came over from Pittsburgh last year. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he adds to this team. Because, like I say, I really haven't seen a lot of him per se. He's a depth piece that's really going to be, kind of important for this team. And, of course, Greenway. He's hot and cold. I've noticed that too. he reminds me a lot of Dumba. Like, between him and Dumba, they're really big lightning rods for this team. Like, you either love them or you want them gone, like, now. But, I mean, they're definitely key players on this team, and when they're on, I mean, this team is at another level. Because not only do you have to watch out for Kaprizov, but again, Greenway isn't afraid to get in there. Eck isn't afraid to get in there. I mean, Dumba definitely isn't afraid to get in there, which will be huge because for our defense group, especially with Susie and those guys gone, Susie and Suter were two big contributors to our D last year, we're going to need all the help we can get, and we're going to need all of the key players we can get as well. And then, of course, Hartman, Rask, two key players last year as well for us. Because, I mean, Victor Rask actually looked like a good NHL player, which if you talk to most people from, his time in Carolina and even before that, they'll be like, wait, what? Victor Rask actually, turn back the hands of time? What? So, yeah, I mean, when Rask is out, he's another dangerous weapon on this team who might not get like 100 points per se, but he's definitely another depth piece that, if he's on the right line and he can get the right things going, he's another piece that you have to watch out for. And, of course, Kyle Rao, which is another big sort of depth guy who kind of bounces back and forth. But when he's on the ice, I mean, he had a lot of opportunities last year to score. He just couldn't quite get it into the net. But, again, he's one of those players that you definitely want on your team. Because more times than not, he's more of a, defensive and offensive help than a liability, which is huge. And, of course, Sturm, who, honestly, I mean, Nico Sturm, if it wasn't for Kirill Kaprizov, Nico Sturm could also have been in the running for the Calder last year. I'm being dead serious on this because Nico Sturm has a lot of speed to him. He's another one of those players like Kaprizov that you have to watch because he can sneak in behind there, and he's not afraid to get in there either, and he can, set up some great opportunities. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of where he ends up on the line order, if he's going to be towards the top, because he's one of those that can be at the, the third or fourth line, but he could also be first or second line, too. I mean, that he's definitely a really key cog to our offense. And, of course, Matt Zuccarello, the old statesman at this point, who, again, when he came back in last year, he added a spark to this team as well, all things considered. And now over to our defense, as I kind of hinted at before too, with guys like Dumba, obviously Spurgeon, the captain, those two are definitely going to be big pieces, but we have a lot of turnover on our D group. Case in point, Kailyn Addison, be interesting to see what he does this year. Jordy Ben, who came over from Vancouver/Winnipeg. I mean, he's sort of a journeyman, but, I mean, he can put up some points, and he can be very physical as well. Jonas Brodine, who had a very good season for us last year, too. Like, when he was on the ice, he was very, very well, he was very good. Dumba, again, as I mentioned before, he's sort of the lightning rod here. Goligoski, who we got over from Arizona, that's sort of our big free agent that we picked up. I mean, it'll be interesting to see just how he sort of, develops, if he's going to kind of take over like the Suter role or whatever. And then, of course, Dmitry Kulikov, or I can't remember exactly who we picked him up from, but again, another one of the new guys. Dakota Mermis, who sort of played a little bit last year, for depth pieces. John Merrill, another one of our signees, and of course Jared Spurgeon. So, it'd be kind of interesting to see how they do the pairings and who all ends up in Minnesota, who ends up in Iowa, kind of like one of those taxi squad players, even though there's not going to really be a taxi squad. And then, of course, our goaltender situation. We have Andrew Hammond and Hunter Jones, who honestly at this point are probably going to be more of our AHL guys. But Hammond will probably be like our third string. Hunter Jones is probably still going to be down there and just sort of, the developmental guy for us, down in Iowa and stuff like that. It's probably going to be Kakkonen and Talbot. Talbot's going to be our starting goaltender, would be my guess. And Kakkonen's going to be our backup for now. Because Kakkonen last year, he went off to a great start, kind of tailed off at the end, but not necessarily because he was bad, but just because Talbot was, again, between him and Talbot, there were literally two of our biggest players last year, because there was a lot of times where Kakkonen and Talbot saved the Minnesota Wild's ass on more times than I want to admit. I mean, Kakkonen and Talbot were on big time for us, which again is huge because, well, we all know, with Dubnik and Stalock, by the way, hopefully Stalock can actually still play, because it sounds like with him over in Edmonton, who knows? I mean, his career might be a little bit shorter than everyone wanted to, believe or sort of hope would happen. But again, I just hope everything ends up well with him, because it sounds like he has some heart issues or COVID-related heart issues or something like that. But anyway. And of course, we all know Devin Dubnik. Oh boy. Let's just say he was either going to not let in any goals, or it was going to be like a 5-goal night for him. It just seemed like as soon as he got a goal behind him, if it was a little bit questionable, it was game over. Dubnik was done. We were going to lose 8-3 or something like that. So, but Talbot and Kakkonen were definitely the two goalies that sort of leveled the team, which allowed us to kind of push forward, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, basically to sort of wrap this up, I kind of will give you my thoughts on who's going to be wearing the A lot this year. I mean, the guys that I'll probably see wearing the A are going to be Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Foligno, Greenway to an extent. Be interesting to see what they do with Kaprizov if they give him an A. Obviously, Spurgeon's still the captain. And Dumba, I know he wore the A a couple times last year. So it'll be interesting to see, just kind of going in, because again, this team could potentially compete for the Central. But again, we're back in the Central with boys like Chicago, Nashville, who are playoff contenders, Dallas, who is a thorn in our sides, Winnipeg, who is pretty good. I mean, they still have some question marks too up there. And, of course, Arizona comes over from, the West over to the Central, because Seattle is now, taking over the Pacific and all that stuff. So, again, it'll be interesting to see here, because, well, we still have to go up against guys, as I mentioned, like Colorado and St. Louis, which were two playoff teams with us last year. So, I mean, Colorado still looks locked and loaded. St. Louis, you can never count them out. I mean, it's going to be an interesting year, and I can't wait for it. So, yeah. Also, stay tuned, because I have a pretty big thing coming in the mail that just shipped today, as well as a topper for this big thing. Let's just say this is about 6 to 8 months in the making, and if you're a jersey head, especially a hockey jersey head, you definitely are going to want this in your collection before they run out. So stay tuned for that, and yeah, basically until we meet again, this is Jacob. Have a good day.